Shulodd and hello, Zell Amals. I am Matthew Carauddo, author and developer of Diamond Dragons, and today we chat with varying artists, our diamonds in the rough. Hey guys, Matthew again from Diamond Discussions, and we're here with Jenny Leidecker. Jenny, welcome to the show.
Hi, thanks.
So tell us about yourself and your work. Thanks so much for coming on.
Well, I live in Texas and I am a writer. Just, I guess, starting out as a writer now. I've only been doing this for about 2 years, although it's been something I've really enjoyed doing probably my whole life, but really taking it seriously for the last 2 years. I work in advertising, and so I have a day job because, just starting writing 2 years ago does not pay any bills.
I
ever.
completely concur and understand.
I might have enough to get one of those small bags of chips by the time I get my royalties. So,
Oh dear. Hopefully it's an expensive bag of chips.
well, we'll see. Usually, no.
Unfortunately. But now, so you say you're writing, wait, you've written several books, and I know you said you've written some short stories and that you've published some and some are not, etc.
No. So I've written 2 short stories that I've actually published, and I'm almost done with a third. And I'm about to start writing on a short story series that my daughter actually came up with the idea of.
Oh, that's awesome.
It's completely out of my wheelhouse, other than the adult dark humor portion of it. But and then I'm in the process of finishing my book, so I'm about halfway done with it.
Excellent. And then what's the name of the book, and will you tell us a little bit about that?
The name of the book is it's a working name because I don't have one yet. And
No, it's a good answer. I mean, that's a cool thing too, where you can be like, well, it's still, we're looking for ideas out from so if you're watching Diamond Discussions, just email Jenny at, no, I'm totally joking.
No, it's funny. Actually, my mother hates it. What I have.
Wait, the title or the book?
Yes, the title.
You're all both, actually. She's not a very good mom. No, I'm teasing.
Well, I have to tell you. So here's the short end of the story. And what happened is I had decided I'd come up with this wonderful idea for a screenplay for a thriller, and I had started trying to flesh it out with when it comes to a thriller, there's certain things you have to make sure that are involved, and you don't want to miss it, and they can't be out of order, or else things don't work. Sure. And it all comes crashing down like this house of cards. And so I had put it all together and everything, and I have never written a screenplay before.
I understand.
I've still never written a screenplay before. And I sat down and was going to start, formatting it. I could see the entire thing in my head, and here I was going to start my first screenplay. And I find the process of writing screenplays, I find them stifling
a little bit. It can be,
because they're so segmented. When you're used to writing fiction, when you're writing prose and stuff like that, it's a flow, and everything just kind of filters out in this beautiful seamless pattern when you're putting it out there. And in screenwriting, that is not the case.
Right. Actually, I'm glad you brought that up, Jenny, because so for what the viewers know or do not know about me, my background is in theater, performance, film, acting, putting productions together, and just in general understanding storytelling, because it's pretty much everything that I've been doing all my life, and like singing and all these other kinds of things, directing and this kind of thing. And so when they think of the difference between a screenplay and maybe a book, if you tell someone, here's a good thought process, and I may have to look up data on this, that very few people read screenplays in terms of end consumers. I'm not saying that we don't have agents and actors and directors. I mean, they have to read screenplays all the time. I mean, that's what they do. But if you think of the general aggregate of the people of the world who are readers, very few of them have read screen.
No, I've read more than most people, just trying to figure out how to put it out.
And so for me, I always try to break it down a little bit. And if this helps educate people out there, great. If they already know it, then they're probably like, okay, why is this guy going on about it? This is for the people who don't know. So a screenplay, a really good metaphor that I found, I kind of set some rules where I'm like, don't use 8 words when 4 will do. Right? And that pretty much sets the tone for everything with the screenplay, which is you are literally trying to have 15 pounds of potatoes in a 5-pound bag, no more and no less. If you need 12 words to tell it, do it. But if you can do it in 10, do that instead.
And that's what makes it completely different from writing a novel or writing a short story.
And that's the irony, is the short story or any book or whatever, you can be elaborate of describing a chair, describing the environment, describing the coat that someone's wearing. In a screenplay, this would be very, very bad practice, and most people would not like that in terms of the types of people who read screenplays. And then the other major rule that I at least want to say here is that screenplays are, I don't want to say absolutely 100% visual, but mostly. In other words, if you write it and you can't imagine how the camera will do that, like for example, if it's like Jenny's mental acuity inside her brain was very foggy at this moment. She wrestled with the idea of, now suddenly if we start to think, how would I film that? You'd be like, you can't, that there's nothing. That's just filming Jenny's face. So you have to be very specific about what's going on. You'd have to say something like, she clutched at her hair. Something that was visual that the camera can capture. Now, again, it doesn't mean absolutely 100% of it, but absolutely true that you should be like 90% visual with all of the things that you're talking about. And that's how a screenplay goes. It's literally showing, well, what's going on screen now? Are we going to probably be in a wide shot? And I don't mean to describe the shots. I'm saying that what people should do is get that visual feel that while they're reading, they're like, wow, I can see it in my head, as they say.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that's,
sorry to be long-winded on that, but I felt very passionate to say that.
No, and the other thing that screenwriters have to remember as well is you leave so much in the hand of the actor. You can't tell the actor how to portray every part of that character. They're going to interpret it in their way as they see fit. The same thing with the director. You can't direct a director with a screenplay too much. You're giving them, and as well as the cinematographer, they're going to have their artistic view. To write a screenplay, you're writing the start of a collaboration.
Precisely. You couldn't have said it any better, Jenny. I loved it, because especially when you were saying, don't direct the director, don't try to direct the camera. That's something that I see too much of in I don't want to say newbie writers or whatever, but just people who they're not thinking straight and they're not getting the base education that they should before approaching it. And here's how I want to try to approach this, at least in this little conversation, is that so many people look at it like it's bad and wrong when some writer is showing their screenplay and maybe they're trying to direct the camera. I don't look at it like that. I look at it like we need to talk to them and say, did you actually educate yourself before approaching this? Or did you just decide, I think I have a cool idea and I'm going to write a movie? Is that what you thought? Because put it this way, would you, if you were excited about baseball, be like, I'm going to become a professional baseball player and run out and immediately go? You'd be like, someone would look at you and go, whoa, there, Tex. Maybe
you've got stuff to do.
You might want to look into it and find out, like, do I have the fitness level to do those things? Are my arms flexible enough? Are they strong enough? What about your cardio? What about your skills swinging a bat? Do you think you just swing it and there you go, home run? Like,
right. Well, and first and foremost, do you know the rules?
That's all I'm saying. So I get it where if people make mistakes in a screenplay, I don't really care. But it's another thing when you pick up a screenplay and you start reading it and you're like, this person clearly, they don't care about any of it. They don't know anything about anything. And so you're like, what am I supposed to do with this? This isn't competent storytelling. It's not even competent screenwriting. But I just look at it like, it's fine to go outside the box. But the worst part is when people approach something like, hey, I got a great idea for a movie. And you're like, have you ever written a film before? And they're like, no, but I'm just going to write and whatever comes to my head. I'm like, you're not going to learn the rules first? Okay. That sounds...
I've read like 8 different books on screenwriting, and still it's just such a segmented process. And, you have to get into a different mindset in order to sit down and start it. And there are things that I've started and I've got it, I've got a few pages into a few different thoughts and projects and stuff, and one that I can't talk about that, I will end up getting to write the whole thing, and it's going to be great, and I'm excited. But it's just not something I was able to tackle at the time. And so I was like, okay, well, instead of making this a difficult project for me, let me get the story out and let me write it as a book or a novella, whatever it turns out to be. And so I started to write it as an actual novel, this idea I had for this screenplay. And then I was reading, I was actually reading Stephen King's On Writing.
Oh yeah, very good.
And I was in the front half of the book, and everybody should read this book. There's a lot of fun, Stephen King anecdotes in the front of it.
Yeah, like I hear it too, and I've read some of it, but not all of it because I just don't physically actually have it. But I've heard, just really quick, right? It's a little bit more like about his life, and not quite always in some direct way, directly the way that people would think that it's about.
Right.
Yeah, which I love,
You get the story at the front, and then there's some technicalities in the back, but he splits it, so, which is good. So I'm reading it, and he states this one line, and with one line, I wrote an entire first half of a book in my head.
Wow, and I love it.
I could not continue to read what I was reading because it was just running through the entire story in my head, which is the book I'm now writing. So here I was working on this idea for this thriller that I was excited to write about. It's a great story. I'm going to finish it, but I haven't. And everything in this other book that just would not let go of my brain, like to the point, like I said, I couldn't read, anymore. I couldn't do anything but sit down and just start typing it out.
Now, is this the one that you had trouble naming?
Yes, and so that's what we're getting to, right? So
I love it then, because this is very interesting. I like this.
I think a lot of fiction writers often interconnect personal experience along with the fiction, right? So there's always a part of the author that's in the story for a good storyteller, because that's really how you connect to the reader.
I agree.
There's this huge understanding that you have that nobody else has, or you feel like nobody else has, that you have to get out on the page. And there are some things in there that are connected to my family that are true enough. And so I wrote the first 3 or 4 chapters, and I put it in a Google Doc and called my mother and said, I need you to read this and kind of give me your blessing to continue, because there were things in there that are not specific to her, but are specific to her, if that makes any sense.
No, it makes a lot of sense. And actually, I'm glad really quick that you brought that up, that for those who are watching, that's something that you have to really consider whenever you do any kind of story that is not only, because some people think, oh, that's just nonfiction. I'm like, if you're writing a fictional story, but you include some details about someone who's very close to you, and you think they're going to, discover this, you might want to check with them first, even if it's not using their name and everything. Only reason, just out of respect, right? Absolutely. So it's something that a lot of people just don't consider, and they just think everybody can have carte blanche to write whatever the heck they want about anything. And I'm like, always use respect. Come on.
Right. And so here I was, not planning to write this book, wasn't really sure where it was going to end, not really sure where the whole process was going to take me. I got about 15,000 words in like 2 days. And so it was just like, bleh. That's a technical term, by the way, when it just kind of bleh out onto the computer.
I call it stream of consciousness, but your term is a lot more eloquent.
But so I didn't have a name for it. And the actual Google Doc and the Scrivener file and everything on my computer, and that anyone has access to, that I allow to read it as I write it, the title is Another Effing Book. Because I was like, this was not the project I was going to be working on. I was working on this thriller, and I had already had this whole book idea and was going to complete this. But no, here I was, another effing book. And so my mother is still very upset that I haven't changed it, because that's what she she sees every time she logs in to read my progress and everything. She's like, you have to change this. Like, why is it not a new title yet? And I'm like, I don't know what to name
Well,
it.
maybe that is the best title for it. You never know. But I would be like, if you got that right out of Stephen King or something like that, then I would say, it should be like, Flow or King Flow or Flow of Kings.
No, I'm definitely going to have to dedicate part of it, in the acknowledgments or something to him
Well,
because
you said this publicly now, unless you
I
want me to
know
delete this out of the
I
show.
said it more than once.
I'm teasing you.
I completely give him, you know, he has he had the idea.
And
Okay.
as if he needs more kudos or credit, Mr.
Right.
King. We love you.
Right. But so,
Just credit George R. R. Martin. He needs more of it now, right? Because everybody's like, when are you going to write the last book? And he's like, oh my gosh, please. Leave me alone, son.
but normally I have the title before I start writing.
Well, what is normally when you say that? I would like to understand this more, this word normally,
Oh yeah, so because I have all of these projects that are open on my desktop that I work on nonstop. I think a lot of writers do that we don't just work on one specific project straight through, or at least I don't.
Right. I'm different that way in the sense of Diamond Dragons. This has pretty much been all of my time, and also it's all of my focus. But I also believe that, just to interject quickly, is that this is a completely different project. This is a lot more a hero's journey, like Lord of the Rings, The Matrix, Harry Potter, Star Wars. So it's a little different, not to mention the fact that some details have then moved into Diamond Dragons 2. And although that has not been completely written, it is definitely something that I've not only intended kind of from the beginning, but also it's basically ready for action. I just need to write the whole thing out. And Diamond Dragons 3 already has some things going into the queue of possibilities, if that makes any sense at all. But so I completely concur, although I feel like I'm a little different that way.
There are streamline writers, right? They have to finish one project at a time. They have to get start to finish before they can even consider something else. Yeah. I write my mood. So I have different things that make me laugh. The project I talked about that my daughter came up with is hilarious, and so when I want to sit down and try to think about something funny to add to that or write notes to that, then I work on that. I write most of what I've written. The two short stories that I've published in the book that I'm writing currently are both written in first person internal memoir style. So there's not a whole lot of dialogue. There is dialogue, but not a whole lot. It's not dialogue driven. It's because I write psychological suspense and stuff like that. It's the internal struggle is what they're dealing with rather than an external struggle. And so
those are the best kind.
Yeah, and so I write with this first person memoir style. And so usually I have an idea of where it's going, and I know I title it before I start.
Yeah, so. Well, that's totally understandable. Totally understandable. So a few questions.
Sure.
What's your worst writer's habit, in your opinion?
Distractions. I don't shut down enough distractions, or I'll start writing and almost get to the point to where I can take a breath in between. I'm like, okay, I'm at this junction and I can keep going, but then I'll turn on the TV. Or I'll pick up a book and start reading instead of continuing and pushing past it and going forward. So distractions, definitely my worst.
I actually love this answer too, Jenny, because of all the people I've interviewed at this point, or really had discussions with, I don't like to call them interviews, but anyways, that's a good one. No one had mentioned distractions yet, although I think that's part of that whole using the discipline and consistency that would apply to most 8 to 5 jobs. Well, let's say pre-COVID-19 at this point. Hashtag COVID-19. Thanks a lot, man. You were great. Looking forward to another year. But anyway, the idea being is you could not just simply say, well, I know I'm a cook, but I don't feel like it right now. I want to watch a little Netflix. You know what I mean?
Right. Yeah. When you're writing, you can. And I tend to fall into that that rabbit hole because I need to take a second to finish finalizing the idea because it's kind of just swirling in there. And if I can't get it to click just right when I start to write, then I'm just like, okay, well, I need a break. And then my break turns into I just binge watched the whole last season of The Marvelous Mrs. Maisel or something, you know. So distraction definitely is. It's hard not to be distracted. We have so many screens, we have so many opportunities. I'll pick up a book and just start reading rather than writing, which is good though. I mean, those two things are symbiotic. You have to read to write. You have to really kind of allow yourself to get lost in somebody else's world for a minute if you're going to create one for somebody else to read.
Copy that. I mean, it makes a lot of sense to me. How about then, what's your best writer's habit in your opinion?
I don't edit as I go. I just write straight through, and I write the entire story straight through. And even then, when I go back to edit, it's very few edits. So that's probably my best. I don't second guess myself. I just go in and write it.
I love it. Those are two good answers, at least in my opinion. What's the worst advice you've been given? You know, and I always say this to every guest, other than being invited on this show.
So the worst advice I've been given is probably the best advice for somebody else. But I am I need reinforcement, I need encouragement, and I like pats on the back. I'm a little selfish that way. So the worst advice I was ever given was don't let people read your work while you're writing.
Oh wow, that is bad advice.
Well, when it comes to a book, because, and I mean, it makes sense. Several things could happen, right? Somebody could tell you they hated it and you get discouraged and you don't get a chance to actually complete the story and get it done. And so you stop it, right? Or they tell you it's fantastic and you get lazy and you think, oh, well, it's already great. What do I need to do?
Or not to offer a, the so-called devil's advocate, or possibly you give it to enough people that you end up finding several of both, and therein all the twain shall meet, as they say.
Because and you don't know what to do with it.
Now there's the rub. But then people can then eventually, if they do enough homework, they can start to realize that they're like, oh yeah, if 100,000 people liked something, let's not even say that it's your book. Let's say it's The Matrix. Let's say it's Star Wars. Let's say it's Diamond Dragons. Doesn't matter. Then the point is, can you imagine of those 100,000 people that there's probably some other people who don't like your work? And so even if it was 1% of the 100,000 people, or heck, let's just call it 10,000 people, 1% of that is still quite a lot of people who might vehemently dislike you, and they might take their time. Jenny Leidecker's book is hot garbo.
Yeah.
Signed, whatever. And you're kind of like, thanks, that's very helpful. I appreciate you. You're wonderful. You're all very special people. So
you read something else. I'm just not the writer for you. That's fine.
This is all I'm saying.
Yeah, but I'm confident in my ideas when I sit down and start to write. And so someone who tells me they don't like something, it's an opportunity for me to go, okay, well, what part didn't you like of it? What was it that missed the mark for you on what you've read so far?
Right.
And they'll tell me, I've had one person actually tell me that they didn't like something I was writing. And what it ended up being was that it just wasn't their genre. That they didn't like it. That's not what they read. And so it didn't do it for them. And I could have easily just been discouraged by somebody saying, well, I didn't like it, if I didn't ask them why they didn't like it.
Right. And I'm glad you mentioned that too, because it's something I think I've mentioned with some of the other folks that I've had discussions with, which is you kind of have to run some people's thought processes or opinions through a little bit of a filter. And that's not to be overly kind to yourself. It's more of to be like, well, I need to filter out where it is purely opinion. For example, already, I remember at one point, I met someone, blah, 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 how are you? What do you do? And I said, oh yeah, I'm writing a story on dragons. Like, oh, I hate fantasy. I'm like, oh, really?
Don't read it.
So, well, no, I mean, but it was interesting to just hear that was their very first response. It wasn't, oh, you're writing a book. How interesting. I'm not really into that genre, but that's very interesting. Tell me more or something. They were like, oh, I hate fantasy. And I'm like, okay. But it also clues you into the fact that if someone then did read your book and they wanted a certain style of something and they expected something else, they could be quite angry with you, even though that's sort of a non sequitur reason as to why you'd be angry. Like if I read a book and it wasn't the type of book that I wanted to read, then why should I then be angry at you for writing
Right.
a book that I read, even though I didn't? I must have found out somewhere that I didn't like it and then just go
Kept
away,
going. Yeah. Well, and the other thing is too, it's your art.
Of
If
course.
you're a writer, it's your art. There were a lot of people who didn't like Jackson Pollock. I'm a huge fan of Jackson Pollock. I
Right.
think being able to see the depth of the paint on the canvas and everything, there's a story behind that. But there are so many people who just thought it was trash.
Yeah,
And it
incidentally, really quick too, shout out to Ed Harris doing the film with Pollock, which I thought was very well done. It
yeah,
was excellent. I don't remember what year it was, but yeah, so people can
showed the
learn more
mental
about
illness he
Jackson
dealt
Pollock.
with, showed the alcoholism he dealt with, and in the criticism he heard for his work and everything. But it was his art.
Mhm.
And the whole point that he stated was, I don't give a shit if you like it.
Right?
I like it. It's my art. This is my voice. And so I allow people to read it, but I don't allow them to change my voice. I don't
Right.
allow them to create a different artistic outlet for me. If they want to put in that much effort into what I'm writing or what I'm creating, then they need to sit down and create it themselves. If
I
you don't like
agree.
the way
I
I
think that
did
makes
it,
perfect sense to me.
so many things, go and do your own. You
Yeah.
don't change my art for you if it just obviously is not the art for you.
I totally agree. Well, Jenny, it's been a pleasure to have you on the show, and you guys can, who are watching, you can learn more about Jenny's work in the links in the description. I'm Matthew of Diamond Dragons, and one last question for Jenny. So, Jenny, who's the next diamond in the rough?
I told you this when we first got on here, that there are few indie authors or writers that I've actually interacted with. I'd love to with more. And I haven't really read a lot of indie authors' work. And so there is one that I read a screenplay for, and I thought it was great. It was hilarious, and I had the fun of just responding to questions he had about what I liked about it and everything. He was a great guy, and it's funny because that's his name, Guy. So there is a screenwriter out there, and he focuses on New Orleans based
That's awesome.
screenplays, which, me being from the South, that works perfect for me. I've been to New Orleans more times than I can count, so those places make sense to me. But his name is Guy Crawford, and
Great.
I think he's a great writer.
That's beautiful. Well, we'll hope to get him on the show. So there you go. Thanks so much for coming aboard, Jenny, and we'll see you guys next time on Diamond Discussions.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks for watching. Would you like to be a guest on the show, or do you know a diamond in the rough who should? Contact us, DiamondDragonsTale@gmail.com. Until then, Chiong, Chifoy, Vas Res, and Iyayalaha.